Onset, thank you very much for taking the time to sit down with me before the ALGS Championship in Japan. Looks like it's going to be a great event, but for some teams, there is quite a lot up in the air for them. I think the one that's on everybody's minds is Team Falcons. Obviously, there's been that roster change. They also maybe performed, it's fair to say, they didn't perform as well as they would have wanted in Mannheim in the finals. I wondered what you think initially of that roster change to let Genburten go and to bring in Wxltzy from Moist instead.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you look at teams, you look at talent. If you're someone who's looking for results, or you're a fan of a team, and you're like, why would you drop Genburten, one of the best players, multiple LAN winner? And it comes down to chemistry. There was obviously something. I mean, Zero and Hal have talked about it. Jen's talked about it as well. And there was something chemistry-wise, dynamic-wise, personality-wise that after such a long time wasn't working. And I think if you're a team and you lose that, it doesn't matter how talented a player is if you can't get over that hurdle, or that whatever it is, that psychological, emotional hurdle, and kind of trust each other as teammates anymore. So it didn't surprise me to see the change being made, and I think for both players it's the right thing to do. Whether it's right for Falcons, scrims have looked pretty good with the new pickup of Wxltzy. He's had to kind of juggle a few new legends as well as they've found their composition they want to play. So obviously all eyes are going to be on him, as most new additions to Falcons are, because they seem to do one event and then there's the worry of the revolving door that keeps going around. But I think they'll be all right. I think they've been one of the top two performing teams in scrims in the build up to champs. So I think the move looked smart and had to be made, and they've looked pretty solid from there.
I also wonder what you thought about the pickup of Wxltzy, not necessarily him as an individual, but this sort of like collection of good, high-achieving IGLs all on one team. It was unusual to have two top-level IGLs on a team when Hal and Zero got together when Falcons came into Apex, but then to add a third, do you think it's a case of having all that experience as a benefit, or could it perhaps come down to too many cooks in the kitchen sometimes?
I made the joke when they picked him up that Zero was just trying to pick up all the good IGLs who have had results so that nobody else had an idea of what was going on, but I don't think that ever was the case. But I also don't think that Wxltzy is an IGL. Like, naturally, he's not an IGL. Yes, he did kind of take that role up on Moist because nobody else was there to do it. But I think he's much more comfortable being told what to do, and being that kind of the anchor or the slayer on the team to support his IGL's calls. So I think it's more of a natural fit for him to slot back into that position rather than be someone who's going to clutter the comms. And I think the personality of Wxltzy is actually a really good fit for this team, because you obviously have like the high energy of Zero, Hal's personality that everyone knows. And I think Wxltzy is a really good balance to that. He's very kind of level-headed, composed, doesn't get too wound up by things, and just wants to perform. And I think having that quieter voice on the team, even though, like you say, he was having to be the voice on previous teams, has kind of allowed Zero to really take the reins and how to kind of back him up with some calls if he wants to give that input. So I think the chemistry now on the calls in that team is actually pretty solid.
And then before we look at some other teams, how important do you think this event is to Falcons? Obviously, it is important to every team. It's the LGS Championship. It's the biggest event in LGS history. But as the self-described super team with those big names, people coming from teams that were, two teams that won basically all the LANs uniting, and then to not have a very good performance at their first major LAN together on the LGS scene, how important do you think this event is that they not necessarily win, but put a result much more in keeping with their stature in the game?
I think when you look at their results, it's clear how important it is just based upon their history, right? They're not used to not being in the conversation when 5 or 6 games have gone to win a tournament. It was without doubt one of the worst performances that Hal and Zero have ever had. Historically, they have always been there or thereabouts. They're usually the two players who are picking up a trophy at the end of it. And I think it is super important for them. Of course it is, to perform. A lot of, investment has gone into that team. A lot of belief has gone into that team. A lot of work has gone into put that team together. And I do feel like that was an off tournament. I don't think that's going to be something that's consistent. I mean, EWC, they got second place. It's something to highlight as well as their first tournament together. Still made finals, which is, it's a crazy thing to say when you're talking about a team you expect to win tournaments, but you've seen how difficult it is to make a finals lobby at any ALGS event. So even though they didn't perform in the way they wanted to, and they weren't in the running to win it, they still haven't missed out on a final. And I think that shows the bar that they have for themselves. You know, a second place and a finals performance is being seen as disappointing since the team has come together, or the two parts of the team have come together. But I do think that this is a opportunity for them to put a little bit of a stake in the ground and say, like, hey, we are still the team to beat here. And I think a lot of teams going into the event and a lot of fans will still be looking at Falcons as the team to beat.
Yeah, one of those teams that obviously found out just how hard it is to make finals lobbies in Germany was LG. I think they were perhaps got a little bit off the hook in terms of the pressure and attention on them, thanks to everybody sort of talking about Falcons coming 20th. But obviously, 25th for a team like Luminosity with the players that they have was a disappointing result and probably a very big surprise to most people. I wondered what you think of that roster. Obviously, had a little bit of difficulty at times during the BLGS. There was obviously a bit of chemistry, issues at one point. That clip that went, pretty much all over YouTube and social media. I wonder what you think of that team, and do you think that it has the makeup? Because obviously they're all very talented players, but as a collective, do you think that is a team that can deliver like we saw the NRG of old delivering, pushing teams like then TSM all the way in finals lobbies?
It's a team that if I had all three in front of them right now, I'd like to grab by the collar and shake and tell them how much talent they have and the work they need to do to recognize that. I feel like they're lacking in a little bit of self-belief right now. Scrims haven't looked great for them. A little bit of infighting going down, which is to be expected as well. It's not something to highlight too much because these are some of the most competitive people in the world who are striving for perfection, right? And it would be weird to not see arguments happening because everyone has to get their views out and try and address them to find the solution moving forward. But my worry for LG is this a team who is looking to perform now, or is this a team who has recognized what their ceiling is going into this event and is looking beyond maybe this event as to what changes afterwards? Because that's a very dangerous mindset to find yourself in. We know that Sweet is still one of the best microcaller and IGLs that there is in Apex. We know that Sykes, has the ability to win tournaments. We know that Funk is a youngster who has the ability to put a huge amount of kills on the board. But I think it's about putting the work in for them. And I feel like the work still, I look, people have been sick in not being able to play in scrim blocks. People haven't been available for whatever reason. People have overslept, underslept, whatever it is. It's like, you can give me a million excuses, but if I'm the one who's paying the wages, I am expecting you to be there all the time, putting in all of that effort that needs to be. And they're the only ones who can give the true answer on why those days have been missed. Maybe there's legitimate reasons, and maybe it's unfair for me to speculate on it. But I want to see LG perform because a finals lobby is better with LG in it. And I think everybody wants to see LG in that finals lobby competing at the top. But I don't want it to be a case of at the end of the event, they look back and go, oh, if only we would have practiced a bit more. Oh, if only we would have put a bit more time in, because these kind of tournaments, these kind of moments don't come around that often. And I think that LG need to recognize that now with a couple of, still a couple of weeks till the event starts, or less than a couple of weeks at this point, and really put that hard work in to make sure that they don't get a repeat of Mannheim.
I wanted to ask you something that a couple of LG fans were sort of mentioned to me in Germany, and it's really stuck with me even over that, quite long gap, about Sweet and the sort of pathway for players when they play with him. Players come in, maybe they're not quite as experienced, they are new to the game. He's obviously a great IGL at teaching people things on the fly. That's why we see him do so well in non-LGS tournaments like Twitch Rivals, where you pick two people up, two streamers. He did it with Sykes in a tournament before Sykes had ever competed and delivered really strong results. That Sweet's arc seems to be, initial success. He performed well in Los Angeles with Slayer and Funk when it was their first LAN, performed very well when it was one of Guild's, earliest LANs on the team. But things seem to always fall off when perhaps the team get more comfortable, or the I'm playing with Sweet factor seems to wear off, is what people were kind of speculating in Germany after they got knocked out in that second losers bracket. I wonder what your take on that is and why that seems to have been a recurring pattern, whether it's just a coincidence or, what about the dynamic seems to mean that success with Sweet seems to be at the beginning and not at the end of your time as a team.
It's what you're describing is the honeymoon period, right? For any team, a team comes together, they're all excited to play, they're all putting in the hours, they're all working out, they want to impress each other, they want to show what they can do as a team. And like you say, results have come previously with those lineups when they've been new. I think the fall off of Mannheim the question is that a fall off of the team, or was that a bad performance in the same way that we talk about it with Falcons? And I think only champs will really give us that answer. But I think maybe, you know, there's an expectation from Sweet sometimes that when he tells you something once or twice that you don't make the mistake again as an IGL. And I think there's an element of frustration that maybe comes through if that mistake is made again. Then it's like, well, how do we move forward if you keep making that mistake? And they can get a little bit stuck on this kind of back and forth, and then that dynamic starts to kind of rear its head a little bit. Like you say, like you list the players on that team, there's no reason they shouldn't be in the finals lobby. There's no reason they shouldn't be fighting. I think they just need self-confidence and belief at this point. And I think they need to believe in each other. They need to look at each other and go, okay, this is my team, and this is, I believe the two players next to me are the best players in the game. And if they can do that, I think that trust is something that you need in any esport when you're playing on a team. You need to believe that someone's going to make the play off the back of yours. You need to believe that your IGL is making the right call, and the IGL needs to believe that the players are going to follow it. And I think maybe it's not so much the fall off. I don't think it's that. I think it's just, again, it goes down to work ethic and trust and self-confidence in this team. And if they can bring that back, then they will, of course, still be a danger and a threat to that finals lobby.
And then another third team that there's a lot of attention on is Moist Esports, obviously the core of our Split 2 playoff champions in Space Station Gaming. A very bizarre situation that's obviously already been, you know, much discussed with that team going separate ways, Phony moving on, Space Station kind of going, I don't really want any part of this anymore with this roster and the dynamics around that. When those things happen after winning a major title, do you come into the following land? There's obviously also been a big break as the previous champions, as the team that's just won, or has there been enough of a disruption and sort of cloud around that they're kind of coming in as just, you know, another strong team to watch?
I think the type of player is a big contributor to the answer to that. If your IGL is staying in place and you pick up one player to join them, then you're probably talking about it as being the same team. But I think when you are swapping out your IGL for a different IGL, that comes with a very different methodology. That comes with a very different way to play the game, potentially. It's a different approach, communication style, whatever it might be. And I think you start to look at it as a slightly different roster. Now, don't get me wrong, Zainu and Koifel are absolutely disgusting, and they were incredible in Mannheim. It was a breakout tournament for Koifel. You know, there was a lot of the potential was always kind of talked about with him, and he fulfilled that potential. Zainu is now on 2 lands, which is a very small amount of people have done in Apex Legends. And MT, I think, you know, we were kind of putting together a storylines doc ahead of this tournament, and Genome said, like, he believes he's the best IGL that's yet to get a LAN win. And you look at the change, it's been much discussed, but, you know, it was something that was apparently agreed before the tournament. You can believe what you want to believe. And I think, again, you look at the situation, it's like it looks beneficial for both, because there isn't going to be that animosity. There's a clear plan. Moist have been performing pretty well in scrims. MT has fit in very well with the personalities that he's going along with in the 2 former SSG players. And I think that they are no doubt tournament favorite. No doubt tournament favorite. Have the fragging power. MT's a great IGL, and it's just about putting it together now for them. I think that they are up there with Falcons as one of the teams to watch. And the thing that always jumps out to me in scrims, like, people will say, oh, that's Moist. And that has something to it. And they notice that that's Moist. And it's like, okay, we're playing differently because we know that's Moist. And I think when you have that kind of, it's kind of a respect, not so much a fear factor, but a respect from other teams in the lobby, you know you're on the right path.
We've covered, you know, 3 of the teams that kind of always on everybody's mind, no matter what's happened, no matter what tournament we're going into. Is there anybody, bit of an underdog, bit of a dark horse, someone that maybe, you know, doesn't immediately jump out to you when you're, you know, scrolling through the teams in the tournament that people should be keeping their eye on when the event kicks off?
There's a team called Lone Sharks who are my potential pick to win the tournament. And you look at the names on that team and you look at their performances in scrims, and specifically in this meta as well, they have been one of the most consistent teams. And they have a man sat behind them as well in Raven as a coach who, you know, changed the fortunes of TSM back in the day and drove them towards a couple of LAN wins. Very, very talented roster. Knocked Yanya, of course, being picked up as well from previous Team Liquid. Very consistent. Dropped has always been a very good IGL at getting you to a good end game spot. And in this meta, if you can get to a good end game spot, you've got a really good chance of winning games. And I think that they certainly are not even a dark horse, I think, for a tournament. I think the tournament favorite, The only reason I would say dark horse is because they don't have a brand or an organization behind them to kind of highlight and put their name up in the stars. But I think Loan Sharks are, for me, certainly a team to watch.
The lack of org raises an interesting question, something that some players have talked about. We obviously see in some teams already are on the way out to start preparing. Do you think not having the backing of an organization, maybe not them being able to get out and boot camp, to spend time together in person, to only fly out a couple of days before the tournament, obviously huge time zones and all those other things that players have mentioned before. Like I think Wxltzy, when he was on 100 Thieves, said that they felt like their performance was hindered by not travelling out early enough to an event when it was in the UK and they were flying from the US. Do you think that could be a major impact, or when you have that natural quality and you have the experience that in particular Dropped and Knocked have together, that those things are sort of like the tiny things rather than something that can make a major impact?
I would say they can certainly make an impact in day one. I mean, I can tell you from first-hand experience that traveling is tough, especially when you get there. Yeah. Especially mentally. You may mechanically be there, but mentally you're a little bit slower if you haven't slept as well, and you have to kind of catch up on that. And rest is one of the most important parts of a tournament, because of the crazy hours that you're playing. It's game after game. If you go through the lower bracket as well, you can be playing a huge amount of games, all of them with your tournament life on the line, essentially in a row. So it does affect you. I think everybody would like to be able to boot camp, go out early, sit next to your teammates, be able to discuss things in person, show each other screens and go through VOD together and really kind of just tie up them, button up those final pieces that you want to ahead of a LAN, and get close enough that you're not worried about your sleep pattern as well is certainly going to help. But I think there's enough talent on that team that they should still be there. And I think after day one, when they've got their 8 hours, they'll be good. I
should say, just for the purpose of the video, that Raven did a little bit of a cryptic reply to his looking for an organization post. So if before this goes out, they've signed. Forget what we just said. Fair enough. Enjoy your bootcamp. And then just quickly looking at the state of the game, obviously some words that I never thought would come out of my mouth at all in my career is teams might be playing Mirage at the LGS Championship.
Yeah.
I wondered what your read on him as the sort of quote-unquote utility man, which is how the devs have sort of pitched him, and what impact you think a legend that is so different to anything else that Apex offers in terms of the kit that he brings to the table, ignoring the kind of, the ability to scan and check everything, but also just the chaos and the decoys that get thrown out, how much of an impact that will have on the game, on the fights, and ultimately if you think teams are going to stick with using him?
Well, the first thing that happened when I saw the patch notes, I text Dan and I was like, I might be retiring because I refuse to cast an endgame with 20 Mirages, because I'm sorry, I don't know how to do that. And if you can do that, then you're a genius. But when it comes to Mirage, it's an interesting one, right? Because I feel everyone's kind of tinkered with it a bit. But when you're talking about composition in competitive ALGS and in those lobbies, I think that you always have to have something that is going to offer your teammates value. And for me, Mirage is a little bit of a selfish legend when it comes to that. Like, it's your frag is going to be playing Mirage. Yes, you can gain a lot of information, but you're not gaining Evo off that information, for example. So you might be able to find good spots, but with another legend that you can put in there, you can still work with that information and gain Evo, gain shields for your team, and then you can play forward, right? On top of that, Mirage is ultimate, great in a bubble fight. For you, if you're Mirage, on the other team, it's a bit of a pain. You don't know who you're shooting. Can also be a distraction to your team when a lot of clones are running around in a bubble and you're not kind of sure about who you got to fight. So I think that there certainly is value, but I don't think it's going to be a popular pick come LAN. I feel like the other legends, when you talk about the makeup of a team and how they interact with each other, is still stronger. And I think that the breakout of Rampart in the last week or so as well has certainly maybe put that to bed a little bit too.
And I don't think we could sit and talk about the ALGS Championship if we didn't address just what a monumental event this is going to be for the game. Obviously, EA have shared that it's the most tickets ever sold, smashing the record set in Los Angeles by, like 20,000 almost, I think.
Yeah,
like almost
big
3
number.
times. Huge numbers. We're getting towards decent UK football team like size crowds. What sort of, or I guess, what is it going to be like stepping out into that arena for the first time? We've obviously never been in Asia before. We've never seen an event so big. And how much of an impact do you think that the crowd, the energy, the massive nature of the event will have on the players and their level of performance?
It's certainly going to sort the men from the boys when it comes to those big pressure moments, right? I've looked at pictures of the Sapporo Dome quite a lot in the build up to this, and every single time I look at it, I'm like, that is massive. Like, it's huge. Like, it's so big, and the fact that 30,000 tickets, I think it was, or people were going to be moving through the Sapporo Dome during the ALGS week is like, it's huge numbers, and that's people expected. There might be extra people coming, you know what I mean? Like, people who walk up, who see the hype and are excited to join for a day. And when it gets to that match point finals, it's going to be one of the craziest crowds I think ever. And everyone is I'm very excited to see the APAC North community, be that mainstay of the crowd, feel that energy, feel that difference. Because wherever we've been with the ALGS, it's always felt a little bit different, right? In the UK, you have the kind of football cheery crowd. Everyone's, chanting, having a good time. And in NA, it's more hype, and everybody gets behind their teams. But I'm really excited to see what the energy is like in APAC North as well, with the pockets of kind of fans. Because so many people, I've asked so many people, they're like, I'm going to Japan. I'm like, you're going to Japan? It's like, yeah, I couldn't miss this. And it's people from Europe, people from North America, people from all over the world who saw this announcement are like, I can't miss out on this. Like, it has to happen. And I think it's going to be, without a doubt, in my opinion, the greatest ALGS event ever. I think everyone's going to be, without giving anything away, very impressed with the show. I think there's some very special elements where it's really been stepped up for champs. And I think everybody is going to be pretty knocked back by what the team has put together as far as the show is concerned. And when it comes to the Apex, like you say, you got 30,000 people moving through a stadium in a week. It's going to be loud. It's going to be crazy. And my hope is the Apex matches that. And my expectation is, with how unpredictable this meta is, with how we've had a winner this season from North America, EMEA, you could say APAC North, of course, at the start of the year. And in the BLGS, you've had Liquid, even though they're in North America. They're all South American players. It is the most unpredictable ALGS event in history, in my opinion. And I think it's just got every single ingredient for an incredible week and an even more incredible finals day.
Okay. Goosebumps. Fair enough. Onset, thank you so much for taking time to speak to me. And I look forward to seeing you do your thing again in Sapporo, Japan.
Thank you, man.